Hey guys, good morning. Good morning. So glad you all are here for our weekly training. And today we're going to be having some honest conversations about an interesting topic, a controversial topic. It's been in the news quite a while since the onset of the pandemic, and that is the notion of test optional. And a few weeks back, we had a little bit of conversation and training around this when we talked about scholarships and the statistics behind getting accepted and kind of what is the academic profile of students who are earning scholarships in the US. And in that conversation, we kind of hit on test optional just a little bit and why it still might be beneficial to take these high stakes standardized tests, SAT, ACT, even though a school is test optional, it might be more beneficial because of certain other advantages, scholarships being one of them. Well, we're back and talking about it again today because an article came out and it was announced that MIT is going to go back to requiring the ACT or the SAT for admissions. Okay. And so why is that such a big deal? Why are we even talking about it? Why is it in the news? Well, we're going to get into that because once one school kind of makes the declaration to do something, then usually you see other schools follow suit. Just like at the beginning of the pandemic, several schools, even Ivy League, like Harvard, made the announcement, and MIT made the announcement that they were not going to require the test, that it was optional. So those announcements were made, and then several schools followed suit. And now we see where MIT is reversing their policy on having tests be optional. And now they are saying for this fall, this season of new students coming in as freshmen, is going to be required to be admitted. So with that being the case, there may be some other schools that jump on board and require the test once again. So what I'm going to do, guys, is go through this article, kind of interpreting it with my own professional opinion, personal professional opinion, however you want to call it, and some feedback that I've kind of gathered from sharing the article with different colleagues and parents and students and kind of sharing what they had to say. And I'd love to hear what you guys think about it as well. If you want to chime in the comments or, make a request to join in the conversation, because this is interesting and we might see things flip back. And the season of test optional might just be coming to an end. So we've been in the pandemic for about 2 years now or something like that. And I think people are ready to get back to life as usual, even though life as usual might have had some parts that we'd rather not have, including standardized tests. But hey, there's got to be a way to award different admissions, and there has to be a way to award scholarships and that kind of thing. So unfortunately, sometimes you have things that are uncomfortable, but we still have to do it, and we have to make the best out of that. So without further ado, let me pull up the article. 1 second. Okay, guys, so here is the article released last week, April 2nd, 2022. It says MIT will require SAT, ACT again. So I'm just going to kind of get into this article, share some things that I noticed in here, okay? So the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, recently announced the SAT and ACT standardized test will once again be required for students seeking admission starting next school year. That's this coming fall, guys. And, it says once again. So just pointing out that there was a period in life where it wasn't negotiable these tests were required. If you wanted to go to a four-year school, you definitely had to take the test in order to submit it in with your application and, to be considered. So this is just something they're going back to, which used to be the standard of life. They're returning back to that. So that is a change from the last 2 years as MIT and thousands of other colleges and universities decided to give students the choice to send their scores. So you had a choice. They were saying you could still be admitted if you didn't turn it in. But if you still wanted to turn it in, they absolutely did consider it. So a lot of students still took the test and turned in their scores, or students took the test and based on how they scored, made a decision to send the scores or not, since it wasn't a requirement. And largely, they made that decision here because testing centers closed in 2020 due to the pandemic. Many schools say they will continue the policy for at least a while. So don't know how many is, but that's what the article is saying. A group that opposes testing, called Fair Test, noted last autumn that over 1,800 colleges and universities were test optional this year. Even before the pandemic, the University of Chicago made test scores optional. It says, in fact, both the University of California and California State University, Cal State, took it one step further. They removed the test requirement. The two university groups manage over 30 colleges and universities in California and teach about 700,000 students each year. So you can see those are two very large university groups, two large educational institutes, and they have completely removed the test requirement altogether. In announcing the decision in March, the top Cal State leader, Steve R., known as the chancellor, said the move will level the playing field and permit more students to get a high-quality degree. Bob Schaefer is the leader of Fair Test. He said many universities in the U.S. will soon follow California's lead. Those two universities, Cal State and University of California, he says many universities will follow their lead. And he called the movement to eliminate tests not an accident. No accident that they were eliminating the test, okay? So if that is true, then look what's happening here. Against the trend is what they're calling this section. MIT, one of the highest rated schools in the US, is going against the movement, okay? So Stu S. is MIT's head of admissions. In a message on the school's website, he said the SAT and the ACT give the school, which is MIT, gives MIT a way to judge whether or not students are ready, whether or not students are ready for MIT. Okay. In addition, he noted the test will help MIT find students who are able to succeed, but may have come from high schools that are not able to teach advanced coursework. In conversation with MIT's news service, he said, Stu said that test scores, especially in math, permit the school to predict a student's performance. He did say, however, that MIT is not looking for students with perfect scores, but the scores are an important extra piece of information. I'm just going to go ahead and just give you all of Stu's spiel right here. Also, Stu said, since many students took classes by video over the last 2 years, it was hard for teachers to give correct grades. The tests are now more valuable than the grades in some cases. So let's kind of just take a look at everything that Stu said. So for MIT, he is saying that the score is going to be a good prediction of how well a student will perform at that school. And also it kind of helps them to decide amongst all of the applicants, because everybody has good grades, right? And you don't know, out of all of these people with all of these good grades over the past 2 years who really can cut the mustard. And it's hard to say this without, like, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but I think it is true that an A in one place is not the same as an A in another place. And that's just a fact. And also, and that could be just from a state to state thing, not necessarily from an affluent school to a less affluent school. That's not what I mean. I'm just saying that from one classroom to another classroom, a teacher grades assignments and determines what constitutes an A in that class. And then an entirely separate teacher could be right next door to them in the same school, in the same district, gives out assignments and, has a certain understanding of what an A is in their class. Okay, so then you have all of these different courses and all of these different educators, and an A means a different thing to all of those different people. And okay, so we have a GPA where your high school coursework is averaged to give you one GPA, and hopefully that kind of makes everything even and level. But does it? Because then we also have the notion of honors courses, college prep, advanced placement, right? And other things that might vary from state to state or school to school, district to district. And all of those different things kind of make the GPA not a standard measurement in some cases, right? So hence the purpose of an SAT or an ACT in the first place. Why did we ever have these tests for school anyway if we had report cards and a GPA? Well, the reason why was because we knew students had different exposures in different schools or in different courses with different teachers and all of these variables that I've already kind of talked about. And that is the reason why we even had these tests to begin with. But no school, no college looks only at one thing. They are collecting all of these different data points, the GPA, the coursework, the ACT score, your essay, your volunteer work, your extracurriculars, all of those things go into the admission process and into your selection for scholarships. But the reason why you might, they prefer test, or they used to prefer test, and MIT is going back to preferring test, is so that you can get a more accurate picture than just the GPA alone. Okay. And so also what Stu is saying, we knew these kind of discrepancies, for lack of a better word, we knew these kind of discrepancies in GPA existed before the pandemic. So now he's saying if students have been having instruction over the internet and a video during the pandemic for the past 2 years, then more than likely there is still discrepancy, and maybe even more so in GPA. So they're bringing the test back. Okay, so I hope all of that makes sense. I'm reading through the article and just kind of letting you guys know my thoughts at the same time. If it's not coming out perfect, then just understand I am trying to explain it without being offensive. But even still, you can weigh in, because both sides of the argument have very valuable points that are being made, right? And I think what's important is no one thing can judge a student. Overall, my takeaway is no one set of data, no one score, no one measurement can say, hey, this is how the student has performed, and this is how they are guaranteed to perform in the future based on that, right? So not GPA alone, not ACT score alone, SAT score alone, their essay, their interview, whatever. It's going to take a multitude of those things, okay? All of it together to evaluate, hey, is this student a good fit for this university and vice versa. Okay, so moving on. Critics of standardized tests say wealthy students have an advantage and do better than poor students. Wealthy schools often have advisors who help students learn the test. Both the California universities noted this criticism as a reason to eliminate the test. Okay. Stu, however, said the SAT is a good way for the MIT admissions department to see that a student is prepared for college, even if they have not taken the hardest science and math classes. So I'm going to jump in right here and speak as an ACT certified educator. And the ACT, and I'm not saying SAT doesn't have it, I'm just not aware of it because I haven't gone through the level of involvement and training with the SAT that I have with the ACT. And I can speak for this because I know for certain, and I've worked with them on this, that the ACT has a division that is geared solely to equity and making sure that there are no biases and things like that with the test. So the questions and the curriculum and all of the items are screened thoroughly by several layers of experts going through and making sure that the test items and questions do not have any kind of cultural bias in them, that is purely about the information, the subjects, English, reading, science, and math, and that they are not preventing anyone from doing well on it because they may not have been exposed to something in their life. So like the very thing that this paragraph talks about with wealthier students doing better and that kind of thing, which has been a huge conversation in the past, that test, kind of have words and things in there that students might not know because they didn't have that same level of exposure. And what I'm saying is there's an entire division of the ACT that makes sure that doesn't happen, right? So if a question comes up and it uses a term that only a certain sector of the population will understand, it doesn't make the cut to be a question on the test. So that's what I am trying to explain here. And so with that being said, ACT tries to be equitable in its test so that a student could do well no matter what their background is, no matter what their economic background is. And then as far as academics, it's based on a national survey from several, sectors of the population. So colleges, educators, business leaders, that kind of thing. Those people come together to do a national survey to say, hey, this is what students need to know across the nation in order to be successful. And so those are the topics that are on the test. And it is very transparent what those topics are. So that those are the steps that the ACT is taking to kind of make sure the playing field is level in terms of performing well on the test, right? So I've talked about it here before, especially with the math, laying out exactly what topics you're going to see so that you're not going in blind. It's out there. Anybody can access it free, what topics are on each section of the test, okay? So going on, the SAT, ACT can actually open the door to MIT for these students too, he said. And so that's what this paragraph here saying, even if you didn't get to take advanced placement, calculus, and statistics or other courses like that because it's not offered at your school, you can still do significantly well on the test and then use that to help you be admitted into a college, versus a student that may have taken those tests and then decided not to take the test, versus a student that did take AP courses and all of that, and then decided not to take the ACT or SAT. So it can be the test, SAT and ACT, can be used to help benefit your application, especially if your schools did not have certain resources available. So that's the point they're making there. So an expert opinion, let's see. Tiffany Blessing is an advisor for Ivy Wise, a company in New York that helps students think about colleges. She is a past assistant director of admissions at MIT. Blessing said the MIT decision will not affect most students who are already planning to apply. She says, in general, students plan on taking standardized tests and use the test optional choice when the test scores do not turn out to be the way they intended. I would assume she's saying if it's lower than they expected, then they don't send a score. But if the score is great and they meet their goals and is high, then they will send it as a way to enhance their application. Blessing said the decision will help international students show they are comfortable with the test in English and an American style of evaluation. It helps a college or university understand just how strong an A might be in a situation where almost everyone in the applicant pool has A's. So remember, we're talking about MIT, which is one of the highest ranked universities in the US. Most students that apply to MIT have an A. So if everyone has an A, how do you decide who can attend the school and who can't? Because we all know not everyone that applies to a university can be accepted. Not only will not everyone that applies be accepted, but you just can't, right? Because of capacity and how many seats the classrooms hold and the cafeteria and the dorms, right? So there is a limit to how many students can attend each school physically. And with that being the case, there has to be a way to decide out of all of these great students who apply, how do we distinguish between who will be admitted and who will not be admitted this go round, okay? So Blessing also noted that students who are thinking about going to MIT will also send in other scores. American students will send in AP test scores as well. International students will send in scores from their own countries. For a student from Great Britain, for example, MIT will look at scores from their A-level exams and their IGCSE tests in different subjects. So back to Stu. Stu said the test is a tool. The ACT is a tool, and the school will make changes if better tools become available. But right now, it is a tool to help decide who will be admitted amongst all of these quality applicants that are coming in with top-level GPAs. As Stu told the New York Times recently, I'm not saying this is the right decision for any or every other school, but for MIT, we think it is the right decision. Okay? And this article was written by Dan and Faith, and they wrote this article for Learning English. It's a website. So that's the article. MIT has announced that they are starting back. They've had some quotes in this article from both sides of this conversation, those that are in support of like completely dismissing standardized tests for college entrance, and then those that are in support of keeping these tests as a tool to either help students be admitted or to weed out students amongst all of the applicants. But I will say this, and I got this from a colleague that made a comment in response to this article inside of the Facebook group. I'm going to pull it up here because I do not want to misquote it, because it was such a wonderful response to to this article and his thoughts about what was going on. So, and his name is O'Neill Barnaby, and he's also a math tutor and educator. And this is what he had to say. He says, the part of the article where Tiffany Blessing speaks volumes. Say what you will about the test, but she mentioned how the exam, ACT or SAT, further explains how a student received an A in a pool of a bunch of other students who also have an A. That's why they, college admissions employees or college admissions specialists, consider all of those factors. They consider grades, GPA, SAT, ACT scores, etc. It's like how we, math people, can't use just averages to speak about data, right? We need range, median, mode, standard deviation, variance, interquartile range, upper lower quartile, and on and on. We need all of those things. The summary tells us more than one piece ever could, right? The summary, all of those measures of the data tell us so much more than just one piece of information ever could. And I agree with that 100%. I think that is a great takeaway from these tests and test optional and all of that, right? No one thing is going to be an indicator of success for your child. No one thing should be used to judge whether or not a student should be admitted into a college. And that's why they don't, right? But in terms of speaking to the student, you want to position yourself as the best candidate you possibly can, right? So in a pool of applicants who have grades just like you, why not take the test so that you can send it in as a way to distinguish yourself, right? Even sending in a score that's not as high might distinguish you from students who opted not to send in the score at all, right? That can be a way to set yourself apart as well, to say, hey, these are my grades, and this is the score that I made on an exam. And I don't have anything to hide, right? My scores are not, my grades are not inflated, okay? Because there's a lot of inflation that we are experiencing in the world right now, in every facet of life. And academics are included in that, right? And so why not take the test? Why not send in scores as a way to position yourself as a quality candidate, right? And who says taking the score means you're going to make a low score? Like that's not a given as well. Taking the test also can be a huge bump for you, provided your scores are well and high and above average and that kind of thing. So nevertheless, this is the fact. MIT has announced tests are going to be required again. And based on their rationale, I think some other schools will be following suit. And of course, when the schools announced this, they announced it as a temporary thing anyway. So it was always a possibility that test optional was going to go away because it was only announced as temporary leniency due to what was going on at the time. Now that things are seemingly better in some view, you will see where some other schools will likely do the same thing. And be clear, not all schools went test optional anyway. So there were several schools that never opted for test optional. Okay, so guys, that's dropping my phone. So guys, that's going to be the training for today. I hope you enjoyed it. I would love to hear your thoughts about this topic and test optional. What do you think? Should the test be required or not? Do you think taking the test is a benefit? let me know. I'd love to hear you weigh in and follow up to this live. Okay.